Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're putting on our elite consultant hats and tackling the incredibly high stakes of modern business evolution. Now, if you're tuning in, you probably already know the deal. Slapping a shiny new software system onto a deeply rooted legacy problem? Yeah, that almost never works. The reality is, software alone just cannot fix a broken organizational structure. To truly transform, we need a holistic playbook. One that tackles the human, operational, and strategic dimensions of change all at once.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here's the undeniable reality of digital transformation. It involves way more than just handing out new logins. It requires organizations to fundamentally redesign how they work. A true digital shift isn't just some routine IT upgrade. It is fundamentally a human and organizational transition. Think about it. You're reshaping behaviors, you're updating core skills, and you're adjusting your entire governance structure to actually align with those big, long-term goals. So here's our strategic playbook for today. We're going to start with the human side of tech, move into foundational frameworks for change, and then tackle driving individual adoption. From there, we'll hit assessing organizational readiness and wrap up with executing and evaluating strategy. We're going all the way from diagnosing the reality on the ground right down to the micro-level execution and hard metrics. All right, kicking things off with Section 1, the human side of tech.
As an executive or a team leader, you really have to ask yourself a critical question right now. Are you merely managing the technology, or are you actively managing the human transition? Change is pretty much a constant feature of corporate life, right? But unmanaged change comes with incredibly steep, hidden costs. If you treat a digital transformation as a purely technical, isolated IT project, you are absolutely going to hit a wall of fierce resistance. We're talking massive productivity losses and totally uneven adoption across your teams. Without preparing your people, literally the best software in the world will just sit there, underutilized and heavily resented.
Let's move to Section 2 and see how this builds foundational frameworks for change.
To avoid that massive productivity drain we just talked about, we need structured macro-level methods to actually direct our enterprise-wide momentum. We start with the basic physics of change, beautifully captured by Lewin's linear model. Stage 1 is unfreeze. Before you introduce a single new tool, you absolutely must break down and unfreeze those legacy habits. You build psychological readiness by clearly showing why the old way is fundamentally broken. Stage 2 is change. This is that messy, chaotic middle period where you implement, train, and coach your people. And finally, Stage 3 is refreeze. You have to stabilize the change by hard-coding these new behaviors into official policies and job roles. If you don't, they're going to snap right back to their old habits by Friday.
Now for the larger, more complex transformations, we scale up to Kotter's 8-step model. This is a highly authoritative, leadership-focused approach. It kicks off with creating an undeniable sense of urgency and building a powerful guiding coalition of respected leaders. But the piece I really want to heavily emphasize here is generating short-term wins. When you're rolling out a massive digital initiative, change fatigue sets in incredibly fast. People just get tired. That's why sequencing highly visible short-term wins, maybe it's a faster reporting dashboard or a really successful pilot project, is absolutely critical. It gives you the proof of value you need to sustain your leadership alignment and keep that enterprise momentum rolling.
Moving right along to Section 3, driving individual adoption. We've looked at the macro enterprise level, but now we really need to zoom in directly to the individual employee's desk. Because ultimately, if the person actually staring at the screen doesn't adopt the new system, the entire multi-million-dollar transformation fails. Enter the AIDCAR model: awareness, desire, knowledge, ability, and reinforcement. So the crucial point is this. An implementation like a brand new CRM can be 100% technically flawless, but it will be a complete organizational failure if your employees lack the desire to participate or the practical ability to use it in their daily workflow. AIDCAR is an incredibly powerful diagnostic tool to figure out exactly where a specific individual is getting stuck. And then we have Koetter's approach, which shifts our focus over to the social and structural conditions of change. Kotter firmly asserts that you just cannot force adoption from the top down. It doesn't work. Instead, the actual drivers of change are psychological safety, cross-departmental collaboration, and genuine empowerment. If your big digital transformation requires different business units to suddenly start working together, Kotter tells us we have to remove the structural barriers first. You've got to tear down those rigid hierarchies or those old KPIs that end up punishing employees for the temporary slowdowns that naturally happen when they're learning new software.
All right, let's pull all this together into a bit of a masterclass summary. Notice how beautifully these four models actually complement one another. Lewin gives us the staged transition, Kotter gives us that massive leadership momentum, AidCard drills right down into individual adoption, and Kotter fosters the collaborative culture we need to thrive. Modern organizations absolutely must combine these frameworks to survive digital complexity. You might use Kotter to align your executives in the boardroom while simultaneously deploying AidCard on the ground to make sure your frontline workers actually know how to use the new tech.
Which brings us to Section 4, Assessing Organizational Readiness.
Look, before we start building this shiny new digital future, we have to face a really hard truth. We absolutely must assess the structural integrity of the organization as it stands right now. Here are your baseline execution prerequisites. You need to thoroughly evaluate leadership alignment, strategic clarity, employee capability, and crucially, process maturity. Listen carefully to this, because it's a trap so many fall into. Layering shiny new automation on top of immature, broken, or unclear processes will inevitably lead to failure. You aren't fixing the problem. You're just making bad processes happen way faster. You absolutely must simplify and clarify your workflows before you flip the switch on the technology.
And just notice the stark cultural divide here. An outdated legacy mindset strictly discourages risk-taking. If your employees are terrified of making a mistake, they're going to inherently resist any new digital tools. It's just human nature. Conversely, an agile, learning-oriented culture actually accelerates adoption because it treats those early, clunky mistakes with new software as just a natural part of the unfreezing and changing process. All right, the home stretch. Section 5, Executing and Evaluating Strategy. Entering our final phase of the playbook, we focus heavily on actionable execution metrics and continuous monitoring. And this brilliantly illustrates the evaluation lifecycle. It proves that measurement happens constantly, not just at the project's wrap-up party. Phase 1 happens before you even begin. You establish your baseline metrics. Phase 2 is during the rollout. You're actively monitoring help desk trends and live adoption data. Phase 3 happens after, examining that long-term sustainability. This continuous feedback loop ensures your strategy is actually working in the real world, and it lets you pivot your coaching and communication in real time.
So what exactly are we measuring? Well, we track adoption rates to see if people are actually logging in. We track process cycle time to see if the work is getting done faster. We measure error reduction to ensure the new system actually works better. Add in customer satisfaction and your overall return on investment, and you have the exact hard business metrics that prove to stakeholders you've successfully navigated past the short-term disruption and arrived at sustainable operational value.
We've covered a tremendous amount of ground today, all the way from unfreezing legacy habits down to tracking long-term ROI. I want to leave you with one final provocative question to chew on. Are you treating change as a single, finalized training event? Or are you treating it as a continuous transformation lifecycle? A truly mature organization knows that digital transformation is never, ever just a one-off IT project. It is an ongoing human evolution. Rethink your operational mindset, apply the frameworks we've discussed, and you will be well on your way to building lasting digital capability. Thanks for joining me on this explainer.